Hello. So, this evening I'm going to be talking about three stories. One major theme that is actually a really major theme for the 19th century American literature as a whole. Um, in Hawthorne's short story, The Birthmark, Kate Chopin's short story, Desiree's Baby, and Edgar Allan Poe's The Cask of Amontillado, I noticed they all deal majorly with the concept of anxiety over which the direction is social anxiety, essentially, identity anxiety, anxiety over identity, and where you fit into the developing nation. In light of the 19th century, which was meant to depict realism, it's interesting to see that these writers were representing events as they really were. So people really were this anxious about who they were and where they fit into class, gender, the newly redesigned workforce that was becoming industrial, freedom for slaves and immigrants, and so on. So I'll start with The Birthmark and talk about which kind of identity anxieties I've noticed in it that relate to the other two stories I've chosen to talk about. Here it is. I've taken a couple little notes here. That's what I'm looking at to prepare myself to try and talk. So I'll just start. We have two characters and their immigrant assistant. We have Alimer and Georgiana. Georgiana is the wife and Alimer is the husband. Naturally, we have gender as a major issue in this story. Alimer is sort of the mad scientist type who wishes to control nature, to control death, and to eliminate imperfection, which relates to the idea of the ideal, or pure or perfect woman or wife, known as the angel of the house. But this angel of the house, Georgiana, has a defect, which is representative of nature, because nature is imperfect. Nothing is perfect except for science, or which it aims to be in this case. So on. Alimer, Georgiana is actually, I see it this way, she's kind of representative of creativity, which could be an anxiety that people would have. I guess I'm talking about all sorts of social anxieties. That would be my big header here if I were to have one. It would be an anxiety that people would be writing about, because creativity allows some people to discover new things and elevate themselves above others, because America offered that opportunity to everybody, even those who had defects. I mentioned science. One thing that's interesting is the language describing Georgiana, such as poor wife and she's weak and man is strong. I'm trying to find my notes on it, and then my computer fell asleep. Oh, now it's awake again. Okay. I don't record myself often. Actually, when I pulled this up, my old video from the last time I did this for you showed up. Anyway. Okay, I wrote down in my notes that poor wife is repeated a couple times throughout the story, which indicates a tone of sympathy or sadness for Georgiana, indicating that she's weak in comparison to her husband, who does sort of hold the ability to manipulate nature as the story plays out. Furthermore, science also, which people would be nervous about, science and its power and the rate at which it was developing during the 19th century. So, in the story, Hawthorne shows how science has the ability to persuade and disillude people, because early in the story, Georgiana, she's okay with her birthmark on her cheek. Some people even think it's beautiful and would never get rid of it, but Alamer thinks it just, well, let's see, quite destroyed the effect of Georgiana's beauty, was the fatal flaw of humanity, a symbol of his wife's liability to sin. He hates it. And by the end of the story, through his science, he's able to have her almost in a begging tone saying, remove it, whatever be the cost, or we shall both go mad. And she's fully convinced that Alamer has the power through science to change her birthmark and make her perfect, which turns out to be impossible because she dies. In short, this ability that Alamer thinks he has to control nature is super inhumane, because humans aren't meant to be the ones who control everything. That's nature that does that, or God, or whoever began nature. However nature began. Nature is greater than man, and it comes down to that. And one more thing. Well, I guess in relation to the anxieties based on gender that women would be feeling because of the attempt to idealize and have a perfect woman of the house, all of this is expressed in the madness that you see at the end when Georgiana is dead. And Alamer says, "My peerless bride, it is successful. You are perfect." But then she's dead. So, who wins? Nature, which would be death. Okay. It's pretty much everything I think I wanted to cover as far as anxieties in relation to Hawthorne's The Birthmark. Maybe I'll do a little recovery here. So, The Birthmark expresses many things through a little narrative about a husband and a wife. It expresses the anxieties people would feel towards science and its power and its ability to manipulate and control. People were expressing anxieties, or the work expresses anxiety related to gender and how it idealizes women and how they're expected to be pure and perfect, which is not natural. The whole debate over science versus nature expresses anxiety about defects, which I guess relates to perfectivity. That's another word. Okay, moving on. Here we go to Kate Chopin's short story, Desiree's Baby. I liked it, though. I think I like this a little bit better than The Awakening. However, she still is very just out there with saying what she means and not really showing it. For example, when she says, "The love light seemed to have gone out, and my husband changed, and it seems the very spirit of Satan seemed suddenly to take hold of him." It's just, she kind of just puts it right out there. Anyway, that's not what I'm talking about today. I am here to talk about how when I read Kate Chopin's Desiree's Baby, it reminded me of The Birthmark, which I haven't actually read in full in a few months. That's why I felt a little unfamiliar with some parts of it and had to think. But I read this recently, and I noticed that it also expresses a lot of anxiety about gender, because in this case, where you have a husband and a wife, how do I say the wife's name? It's probably something I should have reviewed before I started talking. Oh, duh. It would be Desiree. Okay, wow. Anyway, Desiree is married to Armand. And it's funny because even his name sounds more foreign than hers. However, hers has the accents and the double E, so, and seems there's a lot of French influence, just like in The Awakening. However, talking about gender, it's interesting that as soon as they notice that their child is also imperfect in many ways, like Georgiana in the Birthmark, as soon as they notice their baby is not completely white, the woman is blamed, not the man. The man has the power to actually make her leave and return to her mother who loves her. But you find out in the end, that the husband is actually the one who had a mother who was dark-skinned. Anyway, I shouldn't be summarizing the whole story because you know it. The anxieties, social anxieties or identity anxieties that I see expressed in Desiree's baby are related to race, obviously, because race has the ability to break up a whole marriage and essentially ruin a life that Desiree had building for herself. It's like, as soon as... I'm just looking at my book now. Hang on one second. I guess I would have a question with, look at the child, what does it mean to me? I'm wondering how they noticed that the baby's not white, and I'm reading it here. The mistress by the doors. It comes up on page 341. It's Desiree who says it, but it must over and over. I was a cry that could not help the bleeding. Okay, anyway, I don't know exactly how they find out. It sort of comes to their attention, especially at LeBlanche's, which Blanche makes me think of white. So they're there, and this non-white baby is being compared to a family called the LeBlanches, which is a total separation of black and white without middle ground. Even if you're half white and half black, you're just considered black. The slave language, or just aggressive, I kind of think it makes me think of slave language. It's like words such as punished, young mother, disfigured, and then the final paragraph has Negroes working in the field. Also, when Desiree is walking, when she's leaving her husband and going to return home to her mother, she's walking with bare feet, and they're stubbled and bruised, which makes you think of a slave's feet because they don't often have shoes. So up to this point, the reader believes that she's the one who's not pure, in many ways, like the birthmark. However, you find out in the final little bit here that it's her husband who's not pure. He finds this out through a letter from his mother to his father, talking about how she's so grateful that he loves her because, despite that she's cursed with the brand of slavery. So, that also relates to social anxiety related to secrets, which relates to what I'll be talking about next. Let's finish up with Desiree's baby. It's assumed in the story that race is evil, which is why this works well as a Gothic text. There's no middle ground. Like, when Desiree thinks that she's black and she's talking to her mother, she says, "My mother, tell me I am not white. Armand has told me I am not white. For God's sake, tell me that it is not true. You must know it is not true. I shall die. I must die. I cannot so unhappy and live. I cannot be so unhappy and live." And her mother doesn't really say whether or not she is, so she's led to believe that she's just half black or not fully white. So this ruins her life. She asks her husband if she should leave, and he says go, and she goes, and everything falls apart. But then he finds out the truth. So secrets and truth would also be different sorts of social anxieties. People trying to figure out who they are and not really knowing, but who you are being such a big deal all the time. Having these big fancy names like LeBlanche, or however that's properly pronounced, really defines your self-identity rather than who you are and how happy you were in a marriage before history became an issue. Family ancestry became an issue. And that's about it for my Desiree's Baby discussion. I'm already at 16 minutes here. I'm doing alright. I don't know. This is awkward. I hope this is valuable to you, though. Just I do notice all the way these texts are written, they're all dealing with the same sort of tone that's stabbing at the issue in a way that shows that some people are really concerned about it and other people are being put under if they're of a certain gender or class or family name or race, if they're disfigured, like in Hot Frog, which I could have talked about. But I thought that was kind of too similar to Desiree's Baby because it deals with race and it also just deals with a deformed midget man, which also is very similar to the Birthmark in a lot of ways. So I thought instead I'd talk about the Cask of Amontillado because it's a little different. It's social identity in relation to social standing. And I think that's cool because Poe shows it through a man called Fortunato, which, is symbolic for fortune, which is something that cannot really be controlled, much like nature in the Birthmark. But he can seek revenge, which is a super gothic theme, and so he does. So Fortunato is a wine connoisseur, and Poe, or the speaker here, identifies it as his weakness that he will use to manipulate him in many ways, the way science manipulates people. This speaker is doing it through lies and deceit and identifying a weakness. He uses Fortunato's pride to literally lure him into his death by lying to him. This pride comes from what Poe's speaker is really seeking revenge against, which is really something out of reach of humanity, because we can't really control where we come from or our family name. Therefore, we shouldn't, kill people because they're better off than we are, which is what he's doing. And I see this expressed on page 78 when they first drink, I think this is when they first drank a little bit of wine together. It's not the Amontillado, because I don't think there is any Amontillado anywhere, just a hole to die in. However, they drink, and Fortunato says, okay, our speaker says, I drink, wait, night to your long life, to the buried. Okay, Fortunato speaks to the dead that are buried around us, because we're in a cask, so we're underground. And our speaker says, an eye to your long life. So he's really just lying to him. But then it moves on to a conversation of their family. And Fortunato says, I forget your arms, meaning he forgets what their family arms are, like what they stand for. this seems really important because at this point, Fortunato is starting to get drunk. A theme we also see on Hot Frog, which isn't really good. Our speaker's getting him drunk on purpose so that he is easy to lead into a hole through deceit and lies and then die. But he upsets our speaker by saying he forgot his family arms, signifying that his family is not as significant as his. Oh, yeah. That's the. I'm looking for the quote where he says, "You're a man." Yes. It's also, he really identifies his jealousy, envy for his happiness, for Fortunato's happiness that our speaker can't have because he just doesn't have that fortune that he seeks revenge against. He says, "Come," I said with decision, "we will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy as once I was. You are a man to be missed. For me it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible." So, Fortunato matters, and our speaker does not. High class, low class, social anxiety. And that's that. There's my video. I hope you like it. Thanks for listening. Bye, Jen.